Welcome to Politics. There we go. All right, there's the audio. Sorry, folks, got a little bit of a delayed start. I will edit this audio so that you will hear me from the get-go. It is March 22nd. I'm Hal Ginsberg, and I did some work to try to make it sound better. And of course, the result was you didn't hear me at all, at least for about 2 seconds. I was at a really neat rally yesterday in the afternoon, posted a couple of pictures of it. We'll talk about that. It was against the funding of fossil fuel companies by giant banks. And the goal was to try to get the banks, four of them, Wells Fargo, the big names, JP Morgan, Chase, Citibank, and Bank of America, to divest from their holdings in fossil fuel companies, and also to stop funding more and more drilling. There were a couple hundred, it was a pretty good turnout in DC. And I was really happy to see my good friend Medea Benjamin there, of course, the Code Pink leader and a staunch, unrelenting, I think is the right word, was struggling, the relentless voice for peace. And it was great to see Medea, and we talked a little bit. And, Medea said something about this rally, and we'll get to let me get to the pictures of the rally. So that's a different rally. There's the rally I was at with the owl. Apparently that owl's name is Woodsy Owl. And I guess I knew that, but I thank Jason for making the point. I do hope you'll join me, by the way. You can see the phone number right there at any point, 240-363-7190. We had a nice crowd for a rally in DC. It's tough, man. It's tough to get people out, but we had about 200-300 people there. And as you can see from that picture, I'm going to make some points about it. It was predominantly or overwhelmingly white, and even more overwhelmingly middle-aged to senior group. Now, part of that was by invitation, by design. This was the rocking chair rebellion. But the goal was also to get younger folks, and unfortunately, we weren't real successful. There were some, but not real successful at that endeavor. So you are seeing within the environmental movement a real skewing towards older and towards whiter, and I would have to say probably middle to upper middle class people. So that is unfortunate, and that's the thing we really need to deal with. We really need a multi-class, multiracial, multi-ethnic movement, and I think that's the only way. If there is a way, by the way, if there is any way to save the planet, to save a lot of the beauty. And people say, oh, the planet is always going to be here. You don't have to worry. It's just a big rock in the middle. It's just the third rock from the sun. And that's true. But when we talk about the planet, I think a lot of us are thinking of the biosphere, the beauty, the green space, the blue oceans, the extraordinary diversity of life that we still have, and far less than we had a few hundred years ago, or 100,000 years ago. A lot of studies suggest that humans started extinguishing large mammals as recently as only as recently as 15,000 years ago, or maybe less. Not clear. So we don't have the biodiversity we once had. Humans are responsible for that, but we still have a tremendous amount, and we're rapidly losing it. So I don't see any solution other than a mass movement that includes poor, struggling, working, middle class, and upper class, wealthy, affluent people. You need the affluent people because they have the power and the money, right? I mean, obviously, if they're affluent, they have the money, but they have the power. So that's the only way we're going to save our planet. And I'm not clear how to do it. I wish I had a solution. I'm just here talking to you and hoping that together we'll come up with something. Give me a call, 240-363-7190, 240-363-7190. What do I think will not be the solution? Following what the old gray lady, is not what they call her, the New York Times, it's not what they call it, the gray lady. I say the old gray. It's old because this newspaper was first published back in the 1860s, I believe. And without question, I don't think there's really, some people might say the Washington Post. And I think when it comes to political news, the Post may really have an edge on NYT. I think they both are pretty mediocre in a lot of ways, but you sure get a lot of information from them. And there's no place that's more, while they're often unreliable, I don't know that there's any news source that's as reliable, which may say more about our media today than anything else. But, look, let's be fair. If it's published as a fact in the Times or the Post, I wouldn't make bank on it, but I wouldn't bet against it either generally. Although obviously you have to look at the, at the function of the piece. What is it trying to do? What is it trying to tell me? What benefits accrue to whom by if I believe this article? And what is it keeping from me seeing? Why is this article here instead of, say, an article about something else? And one thing I noticed in today's Washington Post, speaking up, I didn't see any pictures. Now, there may have been there, but I didn't. I saw no photos. I saw no news stories in today's Washington Post about that rally I was telling you about that I was at yesterday. If you subscribe to the Post, or you saw an edition and you saw anything about yesterday's rally for the planet, the rocking chair rally, the third act event with Bill McKibben, let me know. There's that picture again. We've got Woodsy Owl, and I should have some other pics, but I don't. Someone calling me in. I heard a double audio for a second. That's the dreaded double audio. All right, give me a call, 240-363-7190. Yeah, I didn't see anything in the Washington Post today about this, and you'd think there would be. I mean, we did shut down traffic. It was with the assistance of the Metropolitan Police Department, so it's not like we were breaking any laws. Maybe we should be, and that's the plan. Extinction Rebellion is looking at, and I'm not going to give any more information, but looking at a real disruptive activity. And I think maybe that's what we're going to need to do if we're going to save some beauty left on our planet. All right, 240-363-7190, the Hal Ginsberg Show. I'd love to talk to you. It is Halitics Live on March 22nd. And I do want to talk about, so let's get to this article here. This just caught my eye. You can see it, first of all, by Tom Edsall, who on occasion I find to be the least objectionable, shall we say, New York Times progressive in quotations. That's why I found this a really disappointing article in a lot of ways. I mean, there's or column or opinion piece or whatever you want to call it. The unsettling truth about Trump's first great victory. Now, we'll get to that, but I found most of what Edsall wrote unsettling, not because I believed it, but because I was hoping for more. I was hoping for some kind of a unifying argument rather than the typical divisive piece that the New York Times so specializes in. When I say divisive, I mean it divides poor, struggling, working, and middle-class people against each other. So we can't unite against the plutocratic forces that are, in fact, responsible for the problems, largely the problems that we face. Now, we're humans, so we're going to create our own problems. But right now, wealth and income inequality is the biggest driver of the cataclysms we're facing. And I say cataclysms because I'm not only thinking of the climate crisis, I'm also thinking of potential World War III in Ukraine. I'm also considering the global poverty rates and the potential ecological crisis that could well result with mass starvation and the like, which is part of the climate crisis, but also part of overpopulation and wealth and income inequality. All right, let's get to this piece. The unsettling truth about Trump's first great victory. When I saw this, my first thought, well, it really wasn't. But if Edsall is going to be unsettling, is he going to tell New York Times readers something that maybe they aren't expecting? Is he going to unsettle? Is Tom Edsall in the unsettling truth about Trump's first great victory going to unsettle New York Times readers? Now, how would you unsettle a New York Times reader? Well, maybe you'd start saying, hey, a lot of the Trump voters really were very, very disappointed in President Obama's policies. They were hoping for something better for working class people. Instead, they got more of the same, more free trade deals, more genuflecting to Wall Street. They got more endless war, and they were just hoping for something better for themselves and their families. They were hoping for a better life, and instead they got bank bailouts and ever more unaffordable education and uh, more free trade deals and a healthcare plan, Obamacare, that didn't care for them. So they were just struggling for something better. Now that would have been an unsettling truth to tell the New York Times readers, the elites, the coastal hoi polloi, or is that riffraff? Hoi polloi and riffraff, I think, are the same thing. The coastal, well, I don't want to say elite again, but let's go with that. The coastal elites, again, that those Trump voters aren't so bad. They have their own reasons, and they're not all such crazy ones when you think about it. And maybe we bear some responsibility for supporting a neoliberal agenda that has been devastating for the heartland. Maybe that would be an unsettling truth, and that in fact, and studies have shown that Trump won because he was an early opponent of the Iraq War, and because he also talked about trade. So if Edsall had said that, that would have unsettled a lot of New York Times readers without question. But that's not where he went. And I was unsettled by that fact, but completely unsurprised. So where exactly did Tom Edsall go? Well, I think you can tell, and I showed you this pic earlier when I was going through the slide deck, and I think you can kind of grasp maybe from this picture, which accompanies the piece in the New York Times Magazine, and we'll get into it a little bit, but it's the old standbys, right? Racism, mostly, almost, and I think they probably, and I assume, I don't know whether this picture was taken on the mall. It is a very gray day, but folks that are wearing t-shirts, so I'm going to guess it wasn't taken on the mall on January 6th. But at this MAGA rally, you see mostly white faces, but by the way, not exclusively. If you look, you can see there's I'm not sure, but there are people who look like they're of color. Let me say it that way in this photo. So despite the effort, and we'll see the effort in a little bit, to prove that racism was at the heart of Trump's win, they can't even get a photo that only has just white people in it at a Trump rally. And there's a woman in there too, as well, with her arms raised, which is interesting because sexism is also pointed often as a reason for Trump's win. And look, I mean, were those factors? Probably, yeah. I wouldn't doubt it. But it's interesting to say racism when Trump won with far fewer votes than Barack Obama, our first black president, had accumulated in 2 races. So if we're so racist, if Trump wins because of racism, how do you explain Barack Obama's victories? And by the way, in many of the states that Trump, the states that Trump needed to win were states that Barack Obama had won: Wisconsin, Michigan, Ohio. Are those people suddenly all racist? I mean, and is that racism manifesting itself in voting for a white woman as opposed to a black man? Because there were a number of crossover voters, Trump crossovers. So and by the way, the sociological studies that you're going to see in a moment, or slightly, that were in this article, are a little more nuanced, right? I'm being a little too simplistic. The professors who write them aren't that stupid. They understand the big holes in their theory, which I just exposed, right? I mean, how do you get to a point where you say Trump's victory demonstrates racism when we just had 2 terms of our first African American president who got a lot more votes than Trump did, and who got votes from some of the same exact places? How do you demonstrate that? And so what they kind of fall back on is, well, it's not that we're necessarily all racist voters, but the Trump voters are more racist. The Trump voters are more racist. And I don't know, maybe that's true. I don't know how much or where that gets us. I don't know that that gets us to the place we need to be if we want to start winning elections. It may well be that working class white people harbor some views that tend to be more racist than affluent liberal whites on the coast. I'm not sure it's true. It may be true. It may be true based on the kind of questions and the assumptions you make about people. And if you say something like it's harder for a white person to get a job now because of affirmative action, if you ask that question to a working class white American, they're almost certainly going to say that's true. I don't think you would get the same answer from a middle class or upper middle class professional in a law firm in New York City who's white. They may not say that. Does that mean that the working class white who formerly worked alongside an African American or maybe had an African American foreperson on the line at GM, but is now working 3 jobs at Walmart, 7-Eleven, and driving an Uber, does that mean that that person is more racist? I don't know. Is a white person in Akron, Ohio, who lives in a mixed neighborhood necessarily more racist than an investment banker who lives in an all-white suburb of New York City? I'm not going to say that, but they might be, according to the article by Edsall that Edsall's wrote, based on the attitudes that are expressed. So the argument is that these Trump voters tend to be more racist, and that's how Trump won. And but again, they point out, and I give Edsall a little bit of credit because I'm not going to go into so much more detail. I do want to hear from you. 363-7190. This is a show to debate, to discuss. It's not just about what I think. It's kind of been like that to start, but I am very optimistic. I've talked to people. I talked to somebody yesterday who said, "Oh, yeah, I saw you have your live stream." So I said, "Well, what do you think about my live stream?" And they said, I was like watching. I was like, "How does he know how to do all that stuff?" And I was like, "Well, done this. I'm do this stuff. This is what I do. I don't know. As an organizer, I did a lot of live streaming, and I work on computers, so I have some rudimentary knowledge. But being impressed, if you are impressed with my tech savvy, fine. But this is about, if to the extent I have any, but really this is more about our views and our worldview and how we change hearts and minds so we can have a better world. So, like I said, the argument for Trump's first great victory, which is clearly obviously put with tongue in cheek by Tom Edsall, is that it's not just racists who voted for Trump. So, all right, good. But the condescension is remarkable nevertheless. That Trump could capture the hearts and minds of these voters suggests that whatever he represents beyond racial resentment. And so, okay, maybe there's something else, right? You say to yourself, well, gee, look at Edsall, where he's going to give the Trump voters. And by the way, it's so condescending. This entire piece is like you're looking at these voters under a glass, right? It's like, let's dissect them like a frog. Not let's talk to them. Let's not view them as human beings. Let's not consider that they may have needs and wants just like anybody else. Like maybe they do want health care. Maybe they don't want their kids shot up in a war overseas. Gee, that's not something we're going to consider. What we're going to consider is there's this anger, chaos, nihilism, and hostility among Trump voters. This is so, it's nasty. It's ugly. It's nasty. It's mean. It's wrong. If you want to know why people voted for Trump, ask them. Now, I'm not saying that everyone's going to give you the right answer, but find out. Say to them, well, what? I remember talking to a Detroit voter. He used to listen to my show all the time. I got to go reach out to him, reach out to that person, and hopefully they'll listen and watch again. They said to me, I'm voting, and by the way, this was an African American. They said to me, I'm voting for Trump unless the Democrats come up with a plan for creating jobs in Michigan. There needs to be jobs here, and the Democrats are not building a strong economy. And that person was no racist. The person was African American. And they weren't like a self-hating black person. They just were a normal Michigander who saw a state that was struggling terribly and that the Democrats hadn't done anything for. So let's talk to people instead of just look down. And by the way, another way, this is so condescending, is why not have an article? I would love to see this. And I think it would be far more apropos, by the way, in a newspaper that endorsed Hillary Clinton. Far more apropos, the unsettling truth about Hillary's primary victory in 2016. Why not have that article? Why not examine the Clinton voters with, sociologists coming up with various theories for why people voted for Hillary Clinton? I mean, I think that would be very useful, right? Well, was it because they wanted a woman president? Were they biased against Bernie Sanders because he talks with a Brooklyn accent? Did they accept the media lies about Bernie? Were they unsettled by the fact that Bernie Sanders wrote an article in 1973 where he asked, what is it about? I guess it was some sort of, sex crimes that appeals to us. And was that it? I mean, what is it that caused people to vote for Hillary? Because we seem to, or at least the New York Times reader apparently needs to understand some unsettling truths about Trump's win, and to see their voters as some sort of distinct species that is only motivated beyond racial resentment by anger, chaos, nihilism, and hostility, rather than maybe just normal, understandable, and those are understandable emotions for sure in our society. But maybe they're also motivated by, again, just normal human desire to live a decent life, to not feel exploited, to feel economic security. Maybe they don't want us to be in endless war. Do you think that could have been something that the New York Times could have published? I don't think so. It would be too unsettling. It would be an unsettling truth for their readers. All right. Yeah. So I did just again. So here's that picture of the rally there. And it's mostly whites, but is there such a difference in the componentry of that group again versus this a little bit more ragtag, right? The progressives are a little more ragtag looking. I'm going to guess the average income may be a little high. I don't know. I don't want to say that because, look, blue collar workers, and they do appear maybe more blue collar to me, maybe farmers. I don't know. I'm going to guess maybe the average income level is pretty similar between the two. There are a lot of similarities. Those Trump voters, according to Tom Edsall, are motivated by resentment, chaos, hostility. I'll tell you what, I feel a lot of resentment. I feel a lot of anger. I feel a lot of hostility towards the corporate elites right now. So I'm not going to say that those aren't legitimate emotions to have as you look at what's happening to our planet. And you look at how they're exploiting what's left of our resource base and destroying everything in its wake. I'm resentful. Are you? I would assume you are resentful and angry and chaotic. Maybe you share more with those Trump voters than you may think. All right, join me, 240-363-7190. The number's always there. You have no excuse. It's not like I have to give it out all the time like I did on radio, although I do, but I don't need to. You can see it. So again, similar crowd componentry, at least from a racial perspective. I like to think we're not racist. There were black people in this crowd. There were Latinos. There were some young folks, but basically just like at the Trump rally, middle class and older white people predominated at the Third Act rally. And that doesn't mean our message is wrong, or it means that we aren't going to win. And we aren't going to win unless we can unite. across class lines, across race lines, across ethnicity lines. That's the only way. And I don't have the answer, by the way. I want to talk a little more, and I'm going to get one of my favorite quotes in here in a second. So, why? Now, I've talked about functionalism before, and what it is, and why we see what we see. So, functionalism is the premise or the theory that everything in our society serves a purpose. It's there for a reason. I mean, obviously, I'm itchy. I'm an itchy person. You see me scratch a lot. I don't know if that's an aspect of society. That's just physically. Um, but dynamics that you see, they serve a purpose and ultimately are indispensable for the long-time survival of that society. Now, again, I want to make this clear. Doesn't mean they're good. They can be really, really bad things, but they're there for a reason. They serve some purpose for some group, some individual, somebody with power, somebody with money. They serve they're there for a reason. That's what functionalism tells us. And I agree with it. I mean, I think this is a brilliant idea. It's a brilliant theory. I don't know who came up with it. I don't know if you consider this philosophical. I don't know what you would call it, but I'm totally down with functionalism. And if you want to talk about racism or you want to talk about what the New York Times was doing in that article, I don't think you really can do better than, I'm going to see if we can get there, than this. This is an old quote, and I'm going to see if I can get it so you can easily read it, because it really, I think, sums up certainly my belief. And it's a little dated, right? I mean, we're talking about from the 1890s. So it's obviously not this quote here from Thomas Watson, who was a populist farmer, I believe. Maybe he was a lawyer, not clear. I should be clear on that, but I'm not. Populist Georgian in the 19th and early 20th century. And he ran for office under the William Jennings Bryan Silver Party. And I can't remember what they were called. Maybe they were called I think they were called the Populist Party. Anyway, Watson did try early in his career very hard to appeal to black and white voters in Georgia. And Georgia, I suppose, under those circumstances, was slightly less difficult for black people to vote at that time. Maybe I'm wrong, but he clearly had a cross-racial appeal. And so he would talk to these mixed groups of black and white farmers and sharecroppers, and he was saying to them, hey, enough with the racism, enough with the hatred of each other. The function of that dynamic that we see in our society is to keep you two groups at each other's throats, fighting with each other, so you don't take on those Wall Street bankers that are fleecing you, that are keeping the money supply very tight, that have this, because it was this whole free silver movement that the Populist Party was pushing, that they wanted some inflation. The prices of agricultural goods were very low. So the sharecroppers were never able to get out of debt because I must have that wrong somehow. Yeah, that's exactly right, because there was tight money, so prices were low. When you have more inflation, more money, and this is more money in circulation, prices go up. So the farmers wanted looser money. They wanted silver to replace gold, because there's a lot more silver than there is gold out there, and silver is cheaper. So if money is silver backed, prices would clearly rise. And that's what the farmers wanted. It would get them out of debt. They could use the cheaper money to pay their debts to the company stores and the bankers that they had borrowed money from. So Watson is saying, you guys are fighting with each other. There's lynchings, there's all sorts of things going on that are based on racism. So you won't unite and support populists like me who are going to make things better for poor, struggling, working people in Georgia. And he used really good terms, separately fleeced. They're being fleeced. They're deceived and blinded because they don't get how the race antagonism perpetuates this horrible monetary system, this gold standard that is beggaring them both. And he was right. I mean, he was dead spot on. And it's very sad because he later became a race baiter and also an anti-Semite. And the anti-Semitism could also stem from his antagonism towards banks, because the Jewish community has always been associated for reason, although not as viewed as controlling the banking systems. And I looked into this. I thought it was actually, I bought into that too, but apparently most of the big banks are not run by Jewish people in this country. So it's not true that Jews control the banking system, although they do. Jewish people do obviously have influence that's disproportionate to our numbers, but that's just the way it is. So Watson got the functionalism of racism. He got it. The function was that it kept the big bankers large and in charge. And what Thomas Watson is doing in his article, where he talks about what these sociologists are doing when they publish this dreck, when they claim that the reason that people voted for Trump is because they're bitter, they're angry, they're nihilists, they're hostile, they're racist. What that's doing is keeping people who should be reaching out to each other and joining forces to support an alternative to both parties, to a system that is beggaring us, not just individually, not just groups of people, but destroying our entire ecology, our entire ecosystem through endless war, through ecological collapse, and pointing fingers and viewing voters who don't see things quite the way we do as the other, as the enemy. That is perpetuating a system that is not just beggaring us, that's absolutely killing us, destroying us. And I got to tell you, something that happened yesterday when I saw Medea that really upset me, and I actually got into it with a rabbi who was at this event, is I brought up, and remember, this event that we were at yesterday, that I was at yesterday, this was to save the planet, third act rally against the big banks that are financing the climate cataclysm, climate crisis. And I was there to show my concern for the environment, to say, hey, I'm against the big banks, and also, meet folks, talk to people, feel a sense of solidarity. And I talked to this rabbi there who's, pretty progressive, I guess, and he was just would not condemn, would not criticize the U.S. war, that we're fomenting in Ukraine, the proxy war. He just wouldn't do it. Well, Putin's a really bad guy. We can't give in to Putin. And I see this over and over. I saw a comment on Facebook. I'm glad you accept that Putin is responsible for this. And I'm like, okay, yeah, of course. But I'm less concerned right now with whether the tyrant in another country is responsible for the death and destruction or partly responsible. I'm more concerned with what we can and should be doing to end it. That's what my concern is now. And are we doing that, or are we making things worse? And clearly we're making things worse. We're fighting, we're cajoling the Ukrainians to fight to the last Ukrainian. And it's devastating for them. It's devastating for the environment. Endless war is devastating for the environment. And I was talking to Medea yesterday, and she said she asked Bill McKibben, probably the foremost environmentalist in the country. She said, hey, would you say something about how we got to get out of Ukraine? We got to stop financing that war. You're against financing the big banks, and rightly so, Bill. That's why we're all rallying. That's why Woodsy Owl is out there. We're against financing the big banks. Will you talk a little bit about financing war in Ukraine? And he said, no, can't do it. Sorry. Now, I don't know why. Like, I can't speak to the guy. I can't speak to his rationale. I suspect. I don't know. I was going to say, I don't know. I don't suspect. I think there probably are two reasons that are possible, and maybe they go together. One, he doesn't oppose the billions of dollars that we're pouring into Ukraine to perpetuate the war there. Maybe he doesn't oppose that, right? I mean, the corporate media doesn't oppose it. They've done everything possible to prop it up. Remember, the fear is that Trump's opposition to that war might cause us to stop supporting, stop pushing it. So, Trump is obviously baddie number one. So maybe that's it. Maybe Bill McKibben, the world's foremost environmentalist, well, actually, probably the world's foremost environmentalist, maybe is Greta Thunberg. I don't know if she's an environmentalist, but all right, he's an environmental scientist, I believe, not journalist. Anyway, maybe he supports the war, so he doesn't want to speak out against it. And also, maybe he just doesn't want to antagonize a lot of the people he knows are going to be at the rally who support it, or doesn't want to mix, right? Doesn't want to talk about that intersectionality. Huge mistake. Huge. Now, I get it. You might turn some people off. I get that. But in the end, we have to be together speaking truth to power. And only by recognizing that the war on Ukraine and Russia is exactly the same in the end. It stems from the same causes as the war on our planet. A few people are profiting to an extraordinary degree, and the rest of us are just sort of being fleeced to go along with it. And I wish Bill got it. All right, if you want to join, I'm pretty much close to the end. 240-363-7190. We talked about functionalism. We talked about, I wanted to show you a video from yesterday's rally, but I'm not going to get to it today because it's processing on the YouTube. And this is something that irritates me with Google is I do these, I think, pretty nice videos. There's probably a better way for me to share it it's really on me. Right? I can blame YouTube. I can blame Google. But really, if I had just either shared that video yesterday and processed it, if I thought about it, or I could play it from a different player like my SM player VLC, but I didn't do it. So sorry. Folks, have a great day. Oh, I was supposed to have some good news. Yeah, the good news was that at least we had a lot of people out at that rally. And I wanted to play that video. I thought it was really nice what they were doing, what the third act folks and et cetera were doing. But, there's real intersectionality when I say between the anti-war movement, there should be, and the peace movement, or I'm sorry, between the peace movement and the environmental movement. But there's also a real problem that the environmental movement is to a significant degree co-opted by the establishment. And groups that are leading it, like the Sierra Club, are very conflicted. And they have big-time fundraisers. They're going to wealthy individuals for donations. They're working with powerful elites in Washington, D.C., and all of that limits their message, limits their ability to really address the root causes of the crisis. And we saw that when I heard Ben Jello speaking yesterday, who, by the way, is somebody that in the past I've supported. I have respect for Ben. He is now the Sierra Club CEO, but he is a fundraiser. He's a money guy. He started in venture capital. He will go only so far. And in fact, there was a little encomium there to the Ford F-150 because it's an electric. There's the new E-150, and it can go faster than a Ferrari. It's all electric. There are tremendous environmental problems with e-cars, with the cobalt, the rare earth metals, the dredging into the soil. in Africa to get at them, and also Afghanistan, Pakistan, where these metals like cobalt and others are found. And the solution is not more e-cars. The solution is fewer cars. And I'll plead guilty. I have two. We have electric cars, and they're nice. I like them, and I can sort of slightly feel virtuous, I guess. I mean, I am burning less, far, far, far less. I mean, we don't burn any fossil fuels in terms of putting gasoline in the tank, but we do because we use electricity, which in our part of the world comes in somewhat. Some of it is solar and energy and wind energy, but some of it is from natural gas and even coal. So it's hardly the clean solution. The solution is cutting back, is consuming less, is reducing much less. But that is not a message that a money guy's going to want to tell you, because they make money from our consumption, our consuming, not our reducing. I mean, that's why we're all so fat, right? Because the more people eat, the more money that McDonald's and their backers, their financiers make. So ultimately, the solution has to be one that is reduction. And you don't hear that from the environmental movement because it's led by fundraisers and money guys and people who are looking to constantly raise capital from rich and powerful people. All right, that's going to do it. That's on that not very good news note. That'll do it for me today. I'll get you the video tomorrow. Have a great day. Don't forget, Haltix, like and subscribe. I should say that at the beginning, because obviously we lose people over time, but remember, like and subscribe.